Ah, nature. It's so nice this time of year, and oh no. A 3-lane railroad with extremely short trains, and they're all going the same direction. This can only mean we're in Open Transport Tycoon Deluxe, the finale! I can't believe we made it so far. It's really been a journey, but our work isn't over yet. There are some small traffic issues I'd like to fix and some other areas I'd like to put some finishing touches on. And we've still got some trains to add before we hit our goal of 500. But first, this section of track next to one of our sidelines is getting overwhelmed. I need to add a 4th lane that connects the sideline hub to the backbone hub on the right. That's easy enough, but I also have to connect this new lane to all the outputs in this backbone hub. With there already being 3 lanes, adding a 4th is actually pretty tricky. I'm going to start by shifting some stuff around and try to make some more space through the middle of the junction. Now I can rebuild the tracks passing through the junction and going north into the ring road. I don't have enough space to weave all 4 lines through the center, so I collapse them into around 3 lanes worth of throughput. We can assume that out of the 4 incoming lanes, not all of them will be choosing this direction, so supporting only 3 lanes is a pretty safe decision. I have a lot of issues splitting and merging these tracks. This whole junction is kind of a problem zone. There's not enough space to expand to the north or the east because I placed the sideline hubs way too close. If I were to expand any more, I would probably have to rebuild all 3 of those junctions. This area specifically gave me a lot of trouble. It takes our 4 eastbound lanes and compresses them into only 2. That's normally pretty easy, but in this case I didn't have much space to work with. I end up going with a less efficient design, but since the eastbound lanes use less traffic, I think it should be fine. I used some tricks with the path signal to squeeze some extra throughput out of these bridges and tunnels. It's kind of hard to explain, but if you think of a bridge or tunnel as having 1/2 of a lane's worth of trains on it, you can use path signals and shifting level crossings to fix lanes with a fractional amount of throughput. For example, these 3 bridges draw from 2 lanes of input traffic, but together only provide 1.5 lanes of throughput. And since we've established that each lane doesn't have to provide its full throughput, this ends up saving us some space as we don't have to place a 4th bridge and tunnel. And now I can start upgrading the sideline hub to handle 4 lanes. This is a much easier task than upgrading the backbone hub. This sawmill does end up getting in the way though. I always hate when that happens. One of the 4 lanes has to take a massive detour just because of something I can't remove. Those upgrades fixed a lot of our traffic issues. This westbound merge gets backed up sometimes, but fixing that would mean adding a 3rd lane going all the way from here to the factory and then all the way back around again. And there's really not enough space to upgrade the factory anymore. Anyways, let's add some more trains! Now we only have to add 20 more to reach our goal, but seeing as our network is already struggling to keep up with traffic, I have to be careful where I add them. I try to space them out, and only add a handful to stations that are underserviced. And here it is, our 500th train. Finally! But we aren't done yet. Since we're subtracting unprofitable trains from our total, we have to add a couple extra as a buffer. So I actually expand all the way to 510 trains. The network seems to be handling the extra traffic pretty well so far, and now that we've got our big goal out of the way, I can go around and work on some of the finishing touches. There's a bit of empty space left over by the factory. Now that we're done building new tracks through this area, I can go ahead and fill up all that space with some scenery. The decoration for the factory is finally complete. This was a pretty challenging area to fit decoration into. While I'm happy with the result, I think this area could have looked a lot better if I had planned it from the start. There's one area on the map that I've neglected since the very beginning. The Sawmill hasn't received any love since the first few episodes. I bought all this land so that industries couldn't spawn and get in the way, but I ended up never using it. Now I'm really not a sawmill expert. I feel like I've learned a lot about decorating through this series, but there's still a lot I don't know. My style for decorating is more generative, where I build things based on what exists already and keep whatever looks appealing. This approach falls apart whenever I build something larger though. I'd probably have more success if I was more familiar with the tiles I had available. I don't know. Maybe in time I'll become a decoration expert. That's about as much scenery as I can manage right now. I tried to keep this area a little more simple compared to the others. It looks a little empty, but I put down a lot of tiles that react to cargo waiting in a station, and there's really not much waiting right now. I think it's time for a train count. The final train count. As you can see, we have 510 total trains, and only 6 are unprofitable. We've surpassed our goal and reached a total of 504 trains. Yippee! Adding all those trains actually did cause a backup, but considering how cramped this area is, I couldn't really fix it without doing some major reconstruction. The backup isn't really that bad either, it's more of a cyclical thing that happens on occasion. And also, I just don't want to do it. I'd have to reconstruct 3 whole junctions just to fit a new lane through. I mean, look at this. And it's not like I didn't try either. I made a lot of attempts and it just didn't work out. I'd like to interject here. By the time this episode goes up, the next version of Transport Tycoon should be released. They've added a new system to track which settings are the most popular, and the data is available to the public. I want you, the viewer, to make your mark on this data. Go into your settings, and set your maximum bridge and tunnel length to 69 tiles. With enough support, we will show up on this list for most common bridge and tunnel lengths. We can do this together! I've neglected getting a full view of the map for a couple episodes now. Our network reaches every corner of the island. It's a bit easier to see with this map overlay. It's kind of unfortunate that all the scenery we place also shows up as yellow. It makes it harder to discern what's going on in some of our larger stations. This view gives us a much better idea of what's going on. You can even see the backup that I pointed out previously, but the rest of the network seems to be flowing just fine. That actually covers pretty much everything I made for this episode, but I thought I'd take some time to do a retrospective on this whole series. I have to say, I didn't expect for it to do so well, especially considering what kind of building I normally do. There's a lot of Transport Tycoon content on YouTube, but very little of it is what I would consider advanced building. And that's not to say that any style of building is better than any other. I just like this style the most because this is a game that scales really well with a lot of trains. You can get away with doing whatever you want with little to no lag, seeing as this game was originally designed for 90s hardware. That being said, it probably does make it a bit harder to watch for a new player. I try to break down concepts to make them easier to understand, but at the same time, I try not to repeat tutorials that I've already explained in previous episodes. But that assumes that whoever's watching has also seen every previous episode, so I'm really not sure what to do going forward. There are a handful of standalone tutorials that I would like to make, but I feel like most of the big topics have already been covered pretty well by other people. If I did make tutorials, I would skip the beginner stuff and go straight to the advanced. There are hundreds of beginner tutorials already that explain things way better than I could. Anyways, I'm on an extreme tangent. I hope you, the viewer, have noticed the production quality greatly increase over time. Comparing this episode to episode 1 is like looking at a completely different series. I think that over the course of making these episodes, I have picked up a number of recording techniques that really set my content apart from others. So even if my style of building is incomprehensible to a new player, they can think, hey, I have no idea what's going on, but damn, it's delivered to me in a way that is appealing. And then from there, hopefully they can absorb enough through viewing that they can eventually understand what's going on. I mean, this isn't exactly rocket science, but it is train science, and there's not much separating those two topics. There are a number of things I would have done differently with this save had I initially planned far enough ahead. The amount of refactoring I had to do to the network is absurd, and looking back at it now, I wonder if a lot of it was even necessary. The sequential upgrading I performed in pretty much every area of the network left most of the junctions a mess, and each upgrade made them harder to maintain. I definitely underestimated how much infrastructure I would need to properly handle 500 trains. And 500 trains isn't actually that high of a train count in comparison to other games I've personally finished. I think my network plan was just flawed from the beginning, but that's not to say that it was all bad. I think a lot of the decisions I made led to layouts that are more appealing to the eye and were more interesting than a typical network in this style. The ring road, for example, happened by accident, but it stands out as a unique element in the network. The factory area is a great example of what is probably a bad decision, but I ran with it and turned the dial to 11, and as a result, it ended up being the coolest spot on the map. This style of building really lends itself to the absurd. It's something that this game has that can't be replicated elsewhere, or at the very least, can't be replicated without dipping into unplayable frame rates. It's one of the many things that makes Transport Tycoon special. 20 years of development and modding support allows anything to be possible. Anyways, I'm really rambling now. If you made it this far through all my train monologuing, I commend you. Unfortunately, this is the last episode for this series. As usual, the mod list will be in the description. I'll also upload the save file if anyone wants to look around the map. Maybe you can make an attempt to fix my traffic issues. If you, the viewer, have any ideas for future content, don't hesitate to comment them. I've got a lot of stuff in the works, but I'm always looking for more ideas. Anyways, that's enough out of me. I'll see you all again soon.